You're listening to Lighthouse Conversations, brought to you by Lighthouse Haven, a spiritual home for your awakening soul. Lighthouse Conversations is a show where awakening souls gather to be inspired, connected, and enlightened. Spiritual spark plug and host Chelly Canales, that's me, will guide you through the twists and turns of your journey to a safe haven where you are finally free to live your best light. Each episode contains a conversation with a guest who has gone through a spiritual awakening, detailing their unique and life-changing experiences in an intimate and candid way. Although everyone's experience is as unique as they are, we all share one common thread. We're all seeking something. So, come join us on this journey and be prepared to leave with resources that will supercharge you into inspired action. Here's today's episode. Hello, awakening souls. How are you doing this week? It's been quite a week, I think. I have fallen, victim to this mentality of everything is upside down in the world and there's nothing I can do to fix it, which makes me extremely sad, to be honest, but I'm also misguided. I can't change the world. Not one of us can do it all by ourselves, as much as we may want to. But what we can do is affect our immediate sphere of influence. We can be our best selves around the people around us and show others the grace that we wish to see in the world for other people, to show others compassion, to show others that they are worthy and loved and belonging. And I think if we can all adopt this, things will feel easier to process. That's just my opinion. And I just hope to offer you a little bit of comfort through all this, and know that you're not alone. If you're feeling helpless, if you're feeling hopeless, there is a whole community out there of people who are like right there with you. So I'm happy you found your way here. You're going to hear about Carlyn Shaw. Her whole mission in life is making strangers turn into friends. What a beautiful concept. And she has learned so much about the human condition and about how this natural connection through storytelling is enough to not only change someone's life, but it creates a ripple effect that I do think can help to change the world. So I hope you enjoy hearing her story here on Lighthouse Conversations. Welcome, Carlyn.
Thank you so much for having me, my dear.
It is a delight to speak with you. I have been really excited to talk to you about this since we scheduled it, because we've had some great talks in the past. We got to know each other through the spiritual community in Denver, and we both appear in this book called When I Rise, I Thrive, which for me was my first time being published. Was that the same for you?
It was, yeah, aside from blogging, it was my first time as well.
So super exciting experience that we shared together. And I know that the story you shared in that book was a really big turning point in your life. And you've had, I guess you could say, a series of awakenings. I'd love to hear your story. How did you get to where you are today?
Oh boy, oh boy. Well, you're familiar with the hero's journey.
Yes. Oh yes. I write about it. I talk about it. I love it.
So when I share my story, I like to say, well, my hero's journey began when I was 19 years old. And 19, I'm 41 now, so this goes back a little bit. But in 1997, that was the year that I woke up and couldn't feel the left side of my body and was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And this was at a time before there was Google and a way to find anyone else out there going through anything. And within 10 months of this diagnosis, two of my best friends were killed in separate car accidents. And so I buried them next to each other. And this was a huge shift in anyone's life. But to be 19 and 20, before we were really talking about awakenings, before we were talking about spiritual communities, this was, back then, MS was considered a death sentence. But I had this diagnosis to compare to the actual death of two friends. So this is where my awareness of perspective began, and how we identify with stories began. And the awakening journey has been my entire life, because this is simply where it started. And so within the year of all of this happening, you have these choices of just spiraling out in your own fear, depression, the why me, trying to make sense of it all in a way that it's impossible to make sense of it all, you know?
Right.
And so something inside of me began to stir. So I was diagnosed in October. My friends passed November and July. And I recognized that I felt so out of control in my life. And at the time, I went to the health center at Indiana University where I was in school, and their solution was to put me on antidepressants. And at the time, this is late 90s, so we're still not where we are today. But my awareness was, I think I'm allowed to be sad.
Mm.
And I found myself really depressed and really sad, but also aware that anyone going through what I was going through without having met anybody else that could understand what I was going through, this would be the state they were in. And I began to think to myself, like, how can I pull myself out of this? And that's when I learned about this idea of traveling overseas for a semester in college.
Yes.
The thought
semester at sea.
Well, and it wasn't, I didn't actually do semester C, but it was just traveling abroad. Like, I didn't know. I'm like, wait, you can study over, you go to another country and study? Yeah. Like, this was a foreign concept. I grew up in South Carolina at the time. Like, none of my friends were doing anything like this. And I realized that I had the power to remove myself from what I was simmering in, because when you were to go through what I went through, it wasn't like people treated me differently, but they were walking on eggshells. They didn't want to upset me by speaking about my friends, or they didn't know how to approach the MS, and very early on, I would tell people, like, I wouldn't own I have MS. Something inside me knew to say I was diagnosed with MS. So I was playing around with like my identity from the very beginning with it, because if you know anything about MS, it comes on as an exacerbation, and my body went haywire. But within a few weeks, it kind of went back to like normal, as I say. So I was like, what is this disease? Because you went to the website, and I tried to learn about everything through the National MS Society. And there's not, like, you're kind of on a solo journey. And this is very relevant to anybody out there with an autoimmune disease, like, it's our bodies, and we're now in this journey with our bodies. And I'm just really grateful that I knew to kind of embrace that acceptance with it at a young age, rather than hold myself up and think my life was over. But when your friends pass, your life's not over. You suddenly realize, actually, I'm the one alive. And so I like to say that MS became my life sentence as opposed to my death sentence.
That's
because
incredible.
I, without asking my parents' permission and without really knowing what I was doing, applied to study overseas in London. And I got accepted into this program. And I called my parents, who at the time, bless their hearts, didn't really know themselves how to help me, because they'd never been through anything like this. And I said, I think I know how to, quote unquote, like, fix me right now. And so, long story short, I went overseas to study, and I realized I could be the version of myself that I wanted to be now that I had removed myself. So like, I took, of course, the MS was still a part of me. I took my medication with me, my friends passing, that was still a part of me. But like, the grieving started to shift, and now I was empowering myself, like, I was like, oh, I can still do things. I can just get my medication shipped to me over here. And it was on my birthday's March 15th, which is St. Patrick's Day every year. And the girls that I was living with in London, we had planned a trip to Dublin, Ireland for St. Patrick's Day, which happened to be the week of my 21st birthday. So here I was in Dublin, Ireland for St. Patrick's Day, which is a dream come true to a 21-year-old, right? And I found myself having this out-of-body experience where I was like, oh my goodness. And I get chills right now even sharing this. I wouldn't be here had everything not happened.
Wow.
And it was this profound moment where I embraced that life wasn't happening to me, but it was happening for me. And it was uncomfortable to allow myself to find a silver lining in these such heavy experiences that I didn't want in my life. I wanted my friends back. I would give anything to have my friends back. In fact, the MS took a back seat because the MS, like, I thought, oh, well, my body's back to normal. Like, who knows when the next thing will happen again, but your friends don't come back to life. Right. So, but I was so like, holy moly, there are silver linings to these things that I literally like, I'd always talked about getting a tattoo with my friend that had passed, and it obviously never happened. And so I was staying at a hostel, and the gal had tats all over her. And I was like, where did you get these? And I literally like grabbed a friend and I go, will you come with me to hold my hand? I really want to capture, I need to embrace this feeling. And I got my first little tattoo of a 4-leaf clover with the letter M, because both of my friends' names started with the letter M. And I was like, I need to remind myself that they're my good luck charms, that I am lucky in life. Like, I am fortunate in life. Like, this, I can carry that with me at all times. And that became the foundation to the rest of my life, because I joke that the universe just loves to send me stories.
And there's beauty in that. I'm so moved by the way you were able to find silver linings, because these are three huge things to deal with, especially all at the same time. And it's rare to be able to find that perspective. I mean, on your own, like
Right.
you were able to create that path for yourself, saying, okay, I've been at this level and I've been existing and I've been surviving, but I can do this. Like, there's so much of the world that can open up to me. And now that my eyes are open from, unfortunately, trauma and hard things, how much bigger can life be? And that's what I'm
Yeah.
getting from this.
And at the time, like, there was no self-help world in my life.
Right.
I wasn't reading. I was reading, obviously, but I don't remember it being the first book I read that was the catalyst in my next
Mm-hmm.
awakening experience. So this journey began in 97, 98. And then in 2009 was another big like veil being lifted off of me. And I was working for a company that I sat in a cubicle all day long. I was a travel nurse recruiter. And I was really good at making other people's lives happen. I used to say my job was to change your life so you can save a life. And I traveled
Wow.
nurses everywhere, and I was their therapist in a sense. But I found myself like I was so disconnected. I was experiencing almost like anxiety and depression simultaneously. Like, there was just something so missing in my world. And I didn't know what it was, but now I know. I'm like, it was my soul, but
That's
like,
right.
I didn't know at the time. I just knew, oh my gosh, I'm really kind of scared at the state that I'm in. And I went to my doctor, who I picked out of the insurance handbook because her name was Dr. Carlyn. So my doctor,
Oh.
I called Dr. Carlyn. I was used to always joke that, like, this is Carlyn calling for Dr. Carlyn. And that's when I actually learned that in the state of California, you pay into disability. And she was really concerned with my state and was concerned I was going to have an MS relapse, and signed off for me to have 10 weeks paid disability. And she said, do you know how to fix yourself? Well, I'd already learned the power of removing myself from a situation, allowing
Mm-hmm.
myself to have a new perspective, coming inward to myself to be able to change what my circumstances were. And first of all, I'm just crying. I didn't even know a doctor could write me time off. And I'm like, is this allowed? Like, like, this is a thing,
This is a
And,
thing.
but I was really, really fragile. It wasn't like I was like calling all my friends, like, oh my God, guess what? I just got this time. I was really lacking self-confidence. I was really lacking, I really wasn't trusted. There was just a lack of, like I said, it's the disconnect, right? But I thought to myself, how do I fix myself? I fix myself by challenging myself, and usually it's the form of travel. And I'd done this a lot between London and Peru, or I guess that's where the story's going. Peru. I'd traveled to Australia for 3 months. I'd done a bunch of things that they just kept moving the needle forward. And every time I felt braver, and every time I felt stronger, and every time I felt I'm more capable with my body, like everything I've ever done. And so I found a program that you could live in Peru or any Spanish country actually, and live with a family and take Spanish lessons. And I thought to myself, I need to climb Machu Picchu. I need to remind myself what my body is capable of, what I am capable of, because this is the real me. The real me isn't sitting in this cubicle all day. And before my trip, I met with a spiritual medium, which I'd never done before. And there's a long story where this spiritual medium just serendipitously just came into my path. And the combination of sitting with a woman that brought my, friends on the other side essentially into the room with me and showed me what was capable of this connection. Like once you experience that, like I always say, once you know, you can't unknow. Like my world was just this awakening to, there is so much more than just this 3D space that I'm in, than just this job that I'm unhappy with. And these friends of mine started giving messages to her to pass to me about this upcoming trip I was going to go on and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, what's happening? Like, how is this? This isn't, again, mind-blowing stuff. At the same time, a friend had given me a book 2 years ago that I had opened. And when I first started to read it, I was like, this book does not speak to me at all. And like, just tossed it back back on the bookshelf. Well, now as I prepped for my trip, I pulled my books out. Like, what books do I want to bring? Now I'm like, I'm hungry for this stuff. Right. And I opened the book, A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson.
Oh, yes. Love,
which
love.
Which 2 years prior had meant nothing to me.
Yeah. To be in the right space for it.
The right space. And now I open this book and girl, that book was my Bible.
Yes.
And so that became this like next step in this journey for me, was this return to love, that recognizing that so much of my healing journey was now my responsibility with myself. And I go climb Machu Picchu and I come back and I end up leaving the job. And I mean, like a slew of everything that was meant to happen and ends up happening. And again, this is that journey of, I like to say that the awakening for me has always been the happier I got, the healthier I got. And the happier I got has always come back to me just reminding myself of my strength, me putting my needs first, me not listening to the peanut gallery about what I should do and what I shouldn't do, me taking risks and me going, this is what I know I need. And listening to that voice, because as these stories have continued, there have been times I have not listened. And we all go through that. We have to be reminded. It's like, oh, really? The universe is going to slap you upside the face if you ain't listening. And like, that's like more of this, like the story that I wrote about in the book that we're both published in. I called it, what was the title of my book? Not my story. My mind just went blank. Smile Even When You Don't Have Teeth is the title. Well, that's because in 2013, I wasn't listening. And first it was a broken foot. Like there was a series of things that happened to me in this not listening and this trying versus allowing, like trying to make something work. I was trying to make a relationship work. I was trying to make being in someone else's world. I was trying to make it work and I wasn't listening. And my bike locked up and catapulted me over my handlebars. And I landed with nothing but my face on the pavement. And I lost my teeth on impact. And I suggest everyone purchase our books to read the real story if there's more to it, and read everyone else's stories. But I already now, like, I mean, my face was destroyed. Like I was actually unemployed at the time. There were so many ways that I could have gone, oh my God, my life. Oh my God, I did this to myself. My life is over. Like, and I allowed myself in that space for about like the 42 to 7, the first few days you're in that, I could have, I should have, beating yourself up, like hold all the things. But then I have to go back to those awakening moments that I've had along the way and gone, you can't say that the MS became a positive thing in your life if you're not going to say that losing your teeth is a positive thing. We don't get to pick and choose. It's always the same. It's always a lesson, but it just shows up in a different way. And for me, I started to call it rocking out with my teeth out.
Yeah.
And my smile is such a part of me. It's such a part of all of us. It's our expression. And I was like, okay, universe, you can rob me of this and you can strip me of that, but you are not going to steal my smile. And the more I allowed myself to just be true to self and have fun, like with my Halloween costume, and have fun with pictures with Santa. And then I wrote a blog about it. Like it was like 8 months after the accident, because I wanted to show my friends and family like the epiphanies and the silver linings that I'd experienced, because everyone was like, I don't think I would have left the house. Like, how are you doing this? And I'm like, well, if you like, there's so much that I gained from this. And then in sharing my story, I invited others to begin sharing
That's right. That's the power.
Me. And then I was reminded, like, this is never about me. Like this awakening journey, like the more like the fact that you're inviting us to share our stories with you, like this is what it's about. Because when we share our stories, we're inviting others to share their stories. And this is the healing journey. That's right. Been my journey with MS. I've shared it on stages. I've shared it in numerous ways. I just talk to people newly diagnosed. I don't want them to feel alone. I want them to feel seen and heard and understood. It's the same with death. Unfortunately, I've buried a handful of more friends since those last two, and death is a big part of my journey. It's one of the spaces I'm here to serve. So I share the stories and I hold space for people. I never imagined teeth loss being another story, but a woman that had been living in shame, not revealing that she had fake teeth for like 18 years from a softball accident. When Brene Brown, by the grace of God, retweeted my blog. And
wow, that's amazing.
Right? And I sent it to her. Like, I was so grateful, because going back to the books, I was reading the book, The Gift of Imperfection.
Yes. Oh, perfect.
And I had my accident. And you're like, how
lines up the way it's meant to.
It lines up. And so how can I deny? I can't curse. I'm reading this. It's like, hello, I'm perfect in my imperfection. I have no teeth. So when I shared with Brene Brown, like, thank you for making vulnerability the new black. Thank you for bringing this to the surface for all of us, because I've been living it. But man, you're now my trailblazer. I'm going to follow in your footsteps. And when a woman reached out to me and I challenged her to meet me like the next week and take our teeth out and get tacos, and it became like my awakening was now her awakening.
So my belief is that when one person tells their truth and says it out loud, innumerable amounts of people heal. It's our duty. It's our responsibility. People are awakening at different times, right? It happens at different times in our lives, more so now than ever. I'm thinking back to when you started your journey, nobody was talking about this stuff. And now it's getting more and more comfortable. I still get scared talking about it, to be honest. And that's why this forum is so important to me, because I'm not here for me. I'm here to serve. I'm like, how can I serve you by sharing your story? How can I serve the people out there listening by hearing your story? And all we have to do is keep our hearts open, see the lessons that came from it, and be able to be vulnerable enough, imperfections and all, to share it. So I commend you. I think it's incredibly brave what you've been doing. And it's funny, I can relate to so many things in your journey, even though our stories are so very, very different. The whole idea of I knew something was wrong. I got this knocking at the door, and I'm like, no, later. I can't deal with you. The universe pushes you in. I call it the hallway. Like, you know what? If you're not going to walk yourself out with your own key on your own terms, we're going to bust down the door and you're going to crash through it. So how do you want to do that? And so, as you mentioned, being on the bike and having your teeth fall out, we're like, oh, hey, here's a reminder. Did you forget? And you took the gift from that instead of felt like, well, I'm done here. I'm over this.
And it's funny you say that. Like, whenever I'm working with someone or sharing my story, I always say, I just want to remind you, it doesn't have to be this painful and expensive.
Right.
You don't actually need to lose your two front teeth. You can, so many of us, it's so wild that we almost have to experience, we almost have to experience these quote unquote tragedies to have our awakening. Like when I share my MS journey, and now that I've been med free for 9 years, I went on to become a marathon runner. I use it to serve me. And I say, I think MS is the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I wonder who I would be now without it. It's something that I always think about, would I have become a runner without the MS? Where would my story be? But then you're almost like, but I wish I didn't have to go through all that. But it's so are these parts of our journey avoidable, or is it just destiny? Like, is this how our soul is to grow?
That's a great question. I think about that all the time.
Yeah,
All
like
the
I
time.
don't know who I would be without, like, my teeth loss. I get people from third world countries that still to this day find my blog, and I wrote it in like 5 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Guess what? There's just not a lot of people talking about losing teeth out there and like having confidence about it. But we have to go through these to become like who we're meant to be.
And while you're doing that, you're creating community. You're
Yeah.
taking a lonely process for someone who feels completely like they're cut loose and flying out in the wind with no tether. Like, what do I do here? This is terrifying. So what do? You get on Google and you search for someone who has a story like yours so you can have hope.
Well, and this is, this is strangers to friends.
Yes,
which is
I wanted
a whole other can of worms.
Tell me about how you came up with this concept and how you run it to this day.
Well, strangers to friends, I started living, I've always been the girl that was never in a clique. I've always been the girl that like was a part of this group and a part of this group and, befriended the janitor in high school.
Yeah.
And he nicknamed me Smiley. So I've always been the gal that gravitated towards being curious about people and their stories. It never occurred to me that I would be the one having stories to then invite people in to share their stories. But that's kind of the journey that I've been on with Strangers to Friends. In 2010, I like to say I manifested my layoff, but that's, again, I was ready to leave the job, and the job was, and then I was let go. And so what happens when you don't have a job? Well, again, going back to 2010, everyone had business cards, and it's still, even now, everyone carries business cards. It's kind of like one of those things that even though phone cords are going out of style, business cards don't. And so I found myself I was like, how do I connect with people? How do I lead? Who am I leading with if I don't have a business card? So I got this inspiration to go to the printing shop and make myself a connection card. And I literally, before I knew what getting a download meant, I'm standing there in the printing shop, Kinko's, I'm dating myself. And I'm like, who am I? What do I do? And I hear the words in me, you turn strangers into friends. And I was like, oh, that sounds like me. So I just made a card that said turning strangers into friends, Carlyn Shaw, my Hotmail email address. I did not have a website at the time, but I did have a fundraising link for my MS walk. So I thought I'll include that on the card. And then I went through this process of who am I handing this to, and this kind of self-discovery with it. And before I knew it, when I was handing my card to people, aside from me being able to invite somebody into this awareness of what is strangers to friends, well, it's this. It's two people connecting, and there's no expectation around it. I don't know why we're meeting. I don't actually know anything about you. You're about to hand me a business card, and oh, looky, you're a software engineer. I don't need a software engineer. Do you want me to call you at work? Like, that's a little awkward. I'm leading with me. And this concept seems so foreign to people. They were like, what do you do with this? And I'm like, I don't know, but the journey of friendship begins with two strangers. And I know that people equal possibilities. And I know that the only way for us to know why we're showing up and how we're to serve each other is if we take the time to get to know each other. And that happens through sharing the parts of ourselves that are oftentimes a little more vulnerable. Now, this wasn't like immediately I knew this, but what I was aware of is because I had that little URL on my card that was a MS fundraising link, what started to happen were people out of the woodwork were going, well, what's your connection to MS? I see you have a fundraising link. And I would just be in myself going, oh, I raise money because I was diagnosed and da-da-da-da-da-da. And then it would be like, my sister was just diagnosed. My mom was just diagnosed. I was just diagnosed. I don't have anyone to talk to about this. And I would sit there and I have chills saying this. And I go, oh, this is why we were meant to meet. Want to go grab coffee? Want to go for a walk? Want to connect me with your friend who's going through this that doesn't have anyone to talk to? I am more than happy. Like, I've got the wisdom. How can my wisdom serve? And so that's how it began. It just began with me living it and inviting people to become aware of it, and then allowing my stories to be stories of catalysts. Or I'd meet somebody that just so happened they had a double kidney transplant. And I'm using this because this is a real story. And then a year later, I meet somebody that had a double kidney transplant. And I'm like, oh my God, you're so alone in your story. I want to introduce you to my friend Renee. let me connect you to. Is it okay? Is it okay? Everyone's like, of course it's okay. No, the moment you can allow somebody to not just be empathized, but be understood, that moment of connection, it's that synchronicity. So my formula is vulnerability equals synchronicity equals possibility. But it's only through these vulnerable moments and when we're willing to show up and be seen and share without feeling like there's something wrong with us, or who am I to share? Who am I to have a story?
Who
right?
am I? Yes.
Who am I? You got to let go of the who am I, because that's the only way anyone knows who you are. And that's how we create this moment that people are craving now in the world we live in, especially with social media and everything behind a screen. Like I'm not saying that's not real, but when you can invite this realness of this more intimate way of connecting, it's game changing. And so Strangers to Friends, I started after my bike accident. The bike accident, I'd gone through a year and a half of really losing myself. And the bike accident brought me back to life. When I shared the story, I was reminded the power of story sharing and how when I share mine, I give you permission to share yours.
That's right.
And I wanted to take this to the next level. So I thought, where are people going online to look to connect? And I thought to start a meetup. So I started a Strangers to Friends meetup in Denver. And at first I thought it was going to be my friends showing up because they were the ones challenging me. We want to know how you do this. And you meet so many amazing people. Like, I want to connect with your amazing people. But it was interesting because all the people that were asking me for it actually weren't the ones showing up to what I was creating. Strangers were. Now, this was a different story because I don't know these people. Now, my friends, I know your story. I can intuitively connect you all. I know how to make the puzzle pieces fit together. But when people I don't know show up, I created the Stranger to Friend experience. And I started leading with open-ended questions that would invite someone to share enough about themselves where it was revealing, where it's lead with you, not what do you do. But we don't need to make this a support group. We're not going straight for the jugular on what are your skeletons? But everything starts to unravel. And it starts with someone feeling like they can trust the space. And so when I can create that space, when I say something like, what's something on your bucket list we wouldn't know, or something about you we wouldn't know. And now I get this opportunity to invite people to play in the space of possibility and synchronicity. And it always works. So I started these meetups. I invite people to play in this space. You know what? The networking happens organically. You know what? The friendship forming happens organically. You know what? Some people even start dating organically. But we're not leading with this. We're just being our true selves.
That is gorgeous.
This is my platform now with Strangers to Friends, and I'm in the process of building out a true membership. I have a meetup in Denver and in Boulder, and I want to empower others to become their own Stranger to Friend facilitators and start attracting the right people they need into their worlds, because I can only offer, I can offer space to play, but where I can empower people is the stories that they want to share and the people that they want to bring in. And let's make this a movement of knowing our stories connect us all. And, one of my favorite examples is I had 17 people show up to a Stranger to Friend experience in Lafayette, Colorado at a brewery. And I led with the question, what's something unique about you we wouldn't know unless you told us? And a woman goes, I'm adopted. And I was like, that is so great. You're right. That is perfect. It's something you obviously like talking about. I would never know it. There's so many questions we can ask. There's so many stories. What I never imagined is that out of these 17 people there, 5 people had an adoption story.
That's crazy. I mean, it's synchronistic, of course. It's not crazy. It's of course, people were there who have things in common.
And I said to them, if I had created a group that said, come to this group, everyone here is going to be adopted, an adoption support group. I go, would you have gone? And they're like, no, I'm not. They go, but to discover it. And
that's where the connection comes.
They're like, this is what it's about, because no one's being shamed in this space. There's nothing heavy. It's light. So I'm like, how do we make support cool again? How do we make it cool just to say, I want new cool people in my life. I want to engage with humans, So that's really where I'm at right now, is inviting people to step out of their comfort zone, trust that this person that they might be judging looks wise. They might be judging career wise. They might be, there's so many reasons we're going to judge from the outside.
Yeah.
When you take that moment to get somebody to know somebody, the magic happens. And this is where the healing happens. And it all comes back to the awakening moment.
Yes, it does. And you're using your experience to create this safe space for other people. And you're addressing something that I think is a huge epidemic right now, which is loneliness. And um, I've definitely been lonely many times in my life. You'd never know it. I know some incredibly successful, full of friends, people who are battling loneliness. And it's that not being seen fully. It's that not having spaces to be vulnerable and show your true selves. I mean, you can go to a million events and still no one will see you. Right. So you're creating something that I think you would need for yourself or did need at some point. I feel like those things are what we can provide, right?
Yes. It's like I've been lonely. I felt I haven't known how to show up. I like to say the people that come to the Strangers to Friends experiences very often, because this is my journey with it, are in between stories. So what does it mean to be in between your story?
In the hallway.
You're in the hallway. Absolutely. It's the health journey. It's the relationship journey. It's the career journey. It's that cocoon. And when you're in that space, you've got one foot in this land and one foot in another. And you're like, I'm not really sure who I need right now. But the people I need are different, because now I have MS. Before I didn't need people with MS. So how do I find the people? You know, before I was in a loving relationship. Now I'm single. How do I find the people? And the older we get, the harder it is.
It's so true. And what you're doing, I imagine somebody online Googling and looking, searching, seeking something and coming across your listing being like, that is a home for me. That is a safe place for me. And I just see like their heart getting full and saying, finally, there's a place I can go. So what you're doing is incredible. And I'm so happy you're putting that out into the world. How can people connect with you online or in person?
Oh boy, I've got hashtag all the things, right?
All the things.
So I will say I also work one-on-one with individuals who are in this shifting space of transformation in between their stories, from a coaching perspective, but also from like a therapeutic perspective, just to hold the space to get things out of their head and know, like, as adults, we need our hands held every now and then. And like, who do we go to just hold our hand through the scary muck, through the muck. And then I get to intuitively connect them with other people I already know in my Rolodex, in my community, that might also be in the same muck. So then I just, that's the fun synergy part. But the way people can connect with me, I have my website, Strangers to Friends, which is TO, not the number 2. So it's strangerstofriends.com. It's Instagram, Strangers to Friends. There's a Facebook page, Strangers to Friends, and there's a Facebook group, Strangers to Friends. And this is the fun space where the group really allows other people to take some empowering ways they can put out there and they can share and do some things. There's the meetup in Denver and in Boulder, which is Strangers to Friends. And I think you can find that just by searching. And then there's me personally. So Carlyn Shaw, and I love to connect with people and learn people's stories. So my website is carlynshaw.com. My Instagram is the Carlyn Shaw. And that is because the other Carlyn Shaw, who lives in Australia, 10 years younger than me, and I actually went and met her. So we met when she was in Vancouver. I stranger to friended the other Carlyn Shaw.
You're meeting all the Carlyns.
Yeah. So she got the rights to all the social media handles before I knew I should claim them. But obviously my web, email Carlyn@carlynshaw.com or Carlyn@strangers2friends. And I would invite anybody out there who is curious, wants to know more, wants to share part of their story, just to reach out to me and say hi.
Yes, please do. I highly encourage you all to take a look, and all the links will be in the show notes as well. Carlyn, this went by so quickly. I love talking to you.
I know. I feel like we could talk so much more.
We could do, further ones down the line. We can do more episodes if you want.
But I'm grateful for you for providing this to everybody. So thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of your community.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And, we're all a part of this community, and it's just sometimes identifying that other person who is and all those other people who are. And it's amazing if we keep our eyes open and our hearts vulnerable, how we can find these strangers to friends that we never could have imagined before, and how that's going to shift the course of your life. So I'm so thankful for the work you do. And thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, my dear.
Thank you for listening to Lighthouse Conversations. If this show resonates with you, it would mean so much to have you rate, review, and share. Don't forget to follow us at chellycanales.com and on social media.